And the gospel reading today is also from Matthew, a reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus was brought before the governor. The governor said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "That's what you say." But he didn't answer when the chief priests and the elders accused him. Then Pilate said, "Don't you hear the testimony they bring against you?" But he didn't answer, not even a single word, so the governor was greatly amazed. It was customary during the festival for the governor to release to the crowd one prisoner, whomever they might choose. At that time, there was a well-known prisoner named Jesus Barabbas. When the crowd had come together, Pilate asked them, "Whom would you like for me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called Christ?" He knew that the leaders of the people had handed him over because of jealousy. Pilate was serving as judge. His wife sent this message to him: "Leave that righteous man alone. I suffered much today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and kill Jesus. The governor said, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" "Barabbas," they replied. Pilate said, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said, "Crucify him." But Pilate said, "Why? What wrong has he done?" And they shouted even louder, "Crucify him." Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, and the crowd was starting to riot. So he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I'm innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It's your problem." All the people replied, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, and he had Jesus whipped, then handed him over to be crucified. The governor's soldiers took Jesus into the governor's house, and they gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a red military coat on him. They twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They put a stick in his right hand. Then they bowed down in front of him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." After they spit on him, they took the stick and struck his head again and again. When they finished mocking him, they stripped him of the military coat and put his own clothes back on him. They led him away to be crucified. As they were going out, they found Simon, a man of Cyrene. They forced him to carry his cross. When they came to a place called Golgotha, which means skull place, they gave Jesus wine mixed with vinegar to drink. But after tasting it, he didn't want to drink it. After they crucified him, they divided up his clothes among them by drawing lots. They sat there guarding him. They placed above his head the charge against him. It read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." They crucified with him two outlaws, one on his right side and one on his left. Those who were walking by insulted Jesus, shaking their heads and saying, "So you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, were you? Save yourself. If you are God's son, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the legal experts and the elders, were making fun of him, saying, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. He's a king of Israel, so let him come down from the cross now. Then we'll believe in him. He trusts in God, so let God deliver him now if he wants to." Jesus said, "I'm God's son." The outlaws who were crucified with him insulted him in the same way. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, the whole earth was dark. At about 3, Jesus cried out with a loud shout, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you left me?" After hearing him, some standing there said, "He's calling Elijah." One of them ran over, took a sponge full of vinegar and put it on a pole. He offered it to Jesus to drink. But the rest of them said, "Let's see if Elijah will come and save him." Again, Jesus cried out with a loud shout. Then he died. The curtain of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised. After Jesus' resurrection, they came out of their graves and went into the holy city, where they appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and what had just happened, they were filled with awe, and they said, "This was certainly God's Son." The word of the Lord. Palm Sunday is a day of parades. We in Los Angeles know something about parades, don't we? I mean, we have the granddaddy of all parades, the Rose Parade. And not only is the Rose Parade one heck of a parade, but I can tell you from experience that the vast majority of the people throughout the country are sitting on New Year's Day, huddled in their living rooms or family rooms with the heat turned up, 5 feet of snow on the ground and sub-zero temperatures outside. And every one of them is eyeing sunny, warm Southern California, and in their hearts wishing they were here and not in Oil City, Pennsylvania. Yes, we in Los Angeles know something about parades. There have been the Laker championship parades where downtown businesses had to close as our gods rode on double-decker buses waving to their adoring fans. And of course there's the Doodah Parade, the Gay Pride Parade, Cinco de Mayo Parade, and the Parade of Fools through our city government. Parades, parades, parades. There's no shortage of parades. So then, not to be outdone, the church has its parade today, Palm Sunday. On Palm Sunday, we celebrate Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem as the new Messiah, the King of Kings. And we shout, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. But let us not be fooled. Our King comes on riding on a donkey, not a double-decker bus, not in a limousine. The 405, the 5, and the 10 are not blocked off for traffic as he arrives. Businesses aren't closed, and people wearing rival Messiah's logos aren't beaten up. Our Messiah arrives like Joe Cocker sings. He should. He came in through the bathroom window. He doesn't come in through the atrium, past the fountain, and into the living room. And in truth, the point really isn't how he comes in. I mean, medieval popes used to ride into towns on a donkey, and they were as pompous as they come. The point is, why did Jesus do it this way, and what does it mean? There's this great story about Billy Graham, Dr. Billy Graham, and the time he was to visit Duke University and preach at their chapel. The week before Dr. Graham arrived, the Office of University Security called and said that they were to have an urgent meeting. At the meeting, they asked questions like, will Dr. Graham be bringing his own security people? He said that all of his security forces needed to be registered with the university police. And if Graham was not bringing sufficient police with him, then the university police needed to be notified so that they could augment their own security forces. The chaplain of the university was informed that the chapel had to be emptied for at least 3 hours before the service in order that a thorough search could be made for bombs. Well, the chaplain then called Dr. Graham and asked him about the security arrangements he required. Graham replied, I have the Lord as my security. I plan to fly into Raleigh-Durham on Saturday afternoon and rent a car and drive it over to the hotel myself. It'll just be me. The chaplain noted that his esteem for Dr. Graham rose to even greater heights, for he refused to be labeled by the university as another celebrity, another big name. Graham was determined to be a follower of Jesus who entered the capital city riding on a donkey. This answers the question of why. Why did Jesus arrive in Jerusalem the way he did? And the answer is because God comes to us as one of us, not as a celebrity, not as a president, not as a superhero. Okay, that's fine, but what then does all this mean? And I think it says a lot about our expectations of who we think this Jesus is and whom we think God is. It seems to me that every time we think we have it all nailed down, God becomes even more elusive to the point of exposing our own agendas and not God's. Belief in Jesus is not about a perfect life, a life without pain, or even a life without suffering. It's not a life where all of our prayers get answered. I have no idea why God seems to intervene in some person's lives and not in others in rather clear-cut ways. Our mistake is expecting God to do or to be something. And oftentimes the experience can be heart-wrenchingly painful. Some years ago, we had a parishioner who was severely crippled by multiple sclerosis. I mean, she was to the point where she could not move a muscle. And oftentimes during a service, she'd be in her wheelchair and her head would slip down to the side in what had to be a terribly uncomfortable position. There was some of you who sat near her who used to get up and gently reposition her head. She was that dependent. At best I could tell she could only speak a whisper and move her eyes. Despite her condition, she had the faith of Job. All day long she would watch evangelical religious channels on her 17-inch black and white RCA television. And as a result, she was convinced if she went to the healing crusade of healing evangelist Benny Hinn, that she would be healed. So at great effort and considerable cost, her family took her to the Honda Center in Anaheim when the Benny Hinn crusade came through. And tickets were expensive. She and her family arrived hours before the show began. They watched as the parade of sick, wounded, blind, and crippled hobbled, wheeled, and inched their way into the arena. Instead of being up front, therefore possibly having the chance of being called up on stage, they were in the very back row, a good 8-iron shot from the stage. But no matter, she was convinced that she'd be healed that night. God had as much as told her so. Well, when the last person on the stage was healed, and the lights turned down low, and the bags were packed for a show the next night 300 miles away, and even after they came for Jackson Browne's piano, Sue remained in her wheelchair. Row double Z, the very back row. It was in that darkened arena, all strewn with litter and floors sticky from spilled soft drinks, that Sue met the Messiah who came in through the bathroom window. The Messiah who rides into town on an ass. The Messiah who dies with us and suffers in our pain and suffering with us. He's not the Messiah we want. The ancient Hebrews were looking for a King David figure, the warrior, the strong, charismatic, chiseled chin leader with all the answers. They missed the real Messiah riding into town down the main road on a donkey. And currently we are expecting to see the Messiah with a COVID-19 vaccine in his or her hand, riding down Broadway in New York City to a ticker tape parade. But in our search and expectations, we miss the true Messiah who rides into town on a donkey. Benny Hinn is a cruel joke, a false prophet, let alone Messiah. He's a symbol of all of our futile expectations to pin God down to whom we think God ought to be. Why else do you think at the beginning of our gospel we're shouting Hosanna, and then minutes later we're shouting, crucify him, crucify him? Palm Sunday, in my opinion, should be renamed Expectation Sunday. And in it, after we make our procession into the church, there should be this giant cross right there in front of the altar where we can nail our expectations of who we think Jesus is. And then we should set fire to these expectations. As for the parade, it certainly isn't down Colorado Boulevard. Amen. Let us now